Welcome, everybody, to Navigate. I'm your host, Tim Austin, and this is the podcast designed to take the guesswork out of transition. And whether you have a transition looming in your future or you're trying to make sense out of a past or a current transition season, this show will help you think more creatively and plan more strategically around any transition season you find yourself in. At Navigate, it's all about leveraging the challenges of change for optimal growth. Emma Austin is what some refer to as a third culture kid, or TCK for short. She grew up in Central Asia and Turkey before returning back to the States for her high school career. She graduated from public high school in 2020 and has recently been on a gap year adventure, which I will let her tell you about. Emma is also my daughter. And it's not often that we get to bring our kids into the work we do and give them a voice and a way to tell their story. So I'm super grateful for Emma's willingness to have this conversation. No bribes, no pressure, just a desire to tell her story. So by the way, if you are a proud parent of a young adult navigating a transition season themselves, you might want to hit the pause button and invite them to listen in with you. Or at least share this episode with them, because you're in for a treat, so get ready to hear from an authentic truth teller, my daughter, Emma Austin. Okay, well, welcome, Emma, to my podcast, and I'm glad you joined me.
Thanks, it's good to be here.
Yeah, well, I want to hear, and I know the listeners want to hear about you and a little bit of your journey and your story, particularly as it relates to some of the transitions that you've gone through. But first, why don't you start off by telling us where you've lived in your whole long life, where you've lived and what you're doing now.
Yeah, so I grew up in Tajikistan and Turkey, lived in Tajikistan until I was about 9 years old, and then lived in Turkey for 3 years. That was during middle school. And then we moved back to NorCal for my high school career. So that was 4 years. And now I just got back from the world race, my gap year with the world race. And I'm just at home for the summer. And then I will go in end of August to alumni team lead for the same organization for world race. So, yeah.
Great. Very cool. And how did you come to that? Because so your journey has been mostly overseas until high school, and then you came back. We came back as a family, and you did your high school years in Northern California. First of all, just briefly, how was that? How was high school after living in the States, after living overseas for so long?
Yeah, it was hard. The transition for sure. There's a lot of loneliness and just like not really, I didn't necessarily really want to be in the States. I loved where I was in Turkey, and I thought that I would be at the school I was for the rest of high school. So it was kind of a shock moving back to the States. And yeah, I just remember a lot of loneliness in those first few years, really all of high school, honestly. But just feeling like people didn't get me. I went to a public high school. So, and then like I remember I just was kind of over that lonely feeling like in my like sophomore, junior year. And so that's when I just like started to like want to fit in more and take steps to fit in. And so I feel like in doing that, I lost like a little bit during those few years of like who I had become like overseas and just who I was, because I wanted to just be known so much. But yeah, I just came back to, I walked away from the Lord a little bit during that, but came back to the Lord my senior year, I would say. And then, yeah, so it was tricky and really just, I don't know.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned wanting to be known, and I think that's really common with third culture kids that grow up on the field and that wrestling with identity. And so you went through some of that struggle through high school, and now you're on this journey you called the world race. And tell our listeners a little bit, what is what is the world race? Is it a 10K? What do you have to do to join the world
No,
race?
it has nothing to do with running.
Okay. I know.
Yeah, not running. It's essentially, I mean, they have different programs. I did their gap year. So the gap year is 9 months long, and traditionally it's 3 months, 3 different countries. But why it's called the world race, I think that's because of their other program called 11-11, which is 11 countries in 11 months. So it's like a race.
Okay.
So each country, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
I don't know.
So what have you been doing up to this point in the world race? What has been the focus for you?
Just like throughout.
Throughout this time. It's been what? How many months now since you've been part of it?
Like 9 months.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
So we were in Georgia for a training period that was about 3 months long, and then we launched to Costa Rica in January. And we were in Costa Rica for 3 months, and then after that we went to the Dominican for 2 months. And basically in each place, the World Race just partners with different ministries, so that's like we work with there. Yeah.
Okay, so you partner with local ministries on the ground.
Yeah.
Evangelism, whatever kind of help and serve in different ways.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and you've told us a lot of some of the ways you've served. It's been very diverse, a lot of different kinds of opportunities. Let's go back to how you navigated that choice. So you get out of high school and you're faced with, do I go to college? Do I do something like the world race? And I know there were probably other options. There were other options you were considering. How did you navigate that? Because I'm asking because sometimes there's that pressure to do it. I'll just do what everybody else does, or I'm going to lose time if I do something other than college, or, there's that. So how did you navigate all of that?
Yeah, I think it was really easy to get like wrapped in that mindset of, oh, I'm going to be behind, like this, like everyone else is going to college. I'm just going to be, behind. But college was originally what I wanted to do, probably because everyone else was doing. And so I applied and got accepted to college, and it turned out that it wasn't going to work out for me to go in the fall semester, and so I was going to have to defer to January or just wait a whole year. And so I was kind of almost forced, I guess, to look at other options. I mean, I could have chosen to go on to another college, but I just figured I wanted to go there, and so I was like, okay, maybe the Lord wants me to do something like YWAM or just like some sort of discipleship training thing for a little bit. So I looked into like 3-month options, like something that would hold me off until January. And then I just found the world race, and it was 9 months long, and I was like really wrestling with that because it was like, that's a whole year off from like my life, it feels like, which I learned now, obviously it's not, but that's what it feels like in the moment. And so I was like, okay, really praying about it. And really the Lord just confirmed it in my heart, like telling me that like I was not ready for college. And that's why all of this had happened. And he had led me to this point that he wanted me to take a whole year off for him to just work in my heart and change some things. And a word that he spoke was purging, because I just, and I see that now, obviously, in retrospect, looking back, like there was so much like that he had to purge, and there were other things that he had to bring up in me, like good things. And it really was a year of that, of him like breaking things and healing things. And so I'm really glad that he brought me to that place, but I definitely wouldn't have chosen it at first. But
yeah. So you did, but you're glad you did.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Let's talk a little bit about identity, purpose, and some of the lessons that you've been learning and the growth opportunities for you this as being part of this world race and being part of this program. There's a lot of community. You're living in tight quarters with people. You're on teams. You you don't have to, go into all the details of the structure, but you're in a great opportunity, a great place to grow and to learn. Tell us a little bit about what are some of the lessons that you've learned or you are learning through this experience.
Yeah. I think that, one of the biggest lessons I learned had to do with like just who the Lord said really basic things. I feel like that I had known like who he says I am or who he is, but I hadn't believed them yet. And so the Lord really was walking me through that this year, just learning to believe those truths. Just truths like simple truths like I'm loved by the Father. Like I feel like as a TCK, as a person who had grown up in a Christian household, I always knew like about the Lord's love, and I knew that he loved me. But I think that because I was almost like raised in a Christian environment, that was something I took for granted because I just I never really believed it. And so the Lord really walked me through what it means to like believe and live out of that truth, like knowing that I am loved. And I think another thing that as a TCK, and many TCKs are prone to do, is like just adapt to their environments, which is great. It's a great thing, great skill to have, but also can be something where we lose ourselves. And so, this year the Lord walked me through a lot of like, just me facing the fact that I had put my identity in the people that surrounded me and not in him, and that I had looked to people for validation, and just fulfilled by people what they thought or said of me. And so the Lord just walked me through that, and I could see that so clearly in Georgia because I was like often really lonely, which is crazy because I was surrounded by this amazing community, but during this training period in Georgia, I was often just so lonely. And and I think that was the Lord really breaking that like desire for validation in me from others. And so then it was cool to watch him walk me through after Georgia. Like then he was like, okay, now you can start learning these things that like you are loved by me, and start believing them. And that was like life-changing for me. I was like, I always knew I was loved, but I didn't like, it's just crazy.
What a powerful lesson to learn.
Yeah.
And something that is so foundational to your, your growth and success in the future, wherever God leads you, wherever he takes you, or whatever kind of times come that are hard or challenging, or, when you're tempted to not believe that, your identity is in him, and you can go back to this kind of as an anchor for your life. I was just thinking as you were talking how it sometimes hurts for when the Lord kind of he strips away things. The first part was kind of a stripping away of some of the false beliefs, mindset, different things that you were believing, in order to then start with a kind of a clean slate, and to build you, with that right, with the right perspective and mindset, and to build that into you.
Exactly.
But it is a process where you have to be patient, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Uncomfortable and just like, like, I don't know, if he couldn't have started teaching me those things if I was still holding on to like friendships or just others' opinions, because I was putting that above him. And so, the breaking is really uncomfortable, but I'm thankful for it.
Yeah. Anything else in that area? Any other lessons learned in terms of your identity or purpose, or anything else that you'd like our listeners to know about?
Well, I would just add on to what I said before with like, I talking about being loved. I knew that. I learned that was like my sole purpose. And I think that on top of like wanting other people's validation, I had often just strived a lot for things and been in this constant state of striving. And so there was just so much security and rest in knowing that all I ever had to do was be loved by the Lord. And that, yeah, I couldn't do anything to earn that or anything like that. And that goes back to believing, because I knew that, but I didn't believe that.
Right.
And so, wow, yeah, I think that was just something I wanted to add.
That's good.
Yeah.
Yeah. What missed opportunities might you have had you not chosen this route and you would have chosen college straight away?
Wow. Yeah.
I know it's hard to, but but just what could have been some missed opportunities, do you think?
Well, I definitely think that just the community aspect. I mean, I know you can find good community in college, but I've just never experienced community like that on the race. And once like the Lord walked me through a lot of that stuff, He gave me some of the sweetest friendships that I could really ever hope for. And so just really cool living in that. And I think I probably would have learned some of the stuff that I learned this year, but it would have taken me a while, or it would have come at a later time. And so I'm just thankful like the Lord taught me some of it now, so I can like start living from there. And I don't know what else.
So as a TCK, as a third culture kid growing up overseas and knowing how to adapt, how has that helped you, or maybe even hindered you? Personally, as a parent watching my third culture kids, I see a lot of strengths in terms of the way they can adapt and be flexible and all of that. And yet you may have experienced some things challenging because of that, or not. What do you think?
Yeah. I think that it's very helpful, like the flexibility aspect of it on the race, because you rarely know really what's going to happen. Obviously, like you have an outline of your like day-to-day schedule, but things often come like very unplanned. We always say like no expectations, like don't have expectations, because you don't know what's going to happen. And so that was super helpful in that. And yeah, I think just like having a background of living overseas was helpful in general, just being more comfortable and adapting more easily to what each country, the cultural aspects are, and I think TCKs often have like a more just like not a higher sense of like what's acceptable and not acceptable in countries, and can just like catch on to that stuff really quickly. Just so that was definitely very helpful. I don't know any unhelpful aspects. I think what I mentioned earlier with just like relationships with people, like being who you think you should be in those relationships instead of your actual real self. But I think that's about it.
Good. Okay, well, good. This has been really great. And so we're, I want to encourage, anybody who has a kid who's transitioning from high school to college, whether they're TCKs or not, I think there's always that piece of owning your faith, personally knowing who you are in Christ. So all of that journey is part of life. And it often happens or excels like when you're kind of transitioning from one thing to the next, So what advice or encouragement might you give to someone in high school who's looking at next steps, third culture kids or not, but we've been talking about third culture kids, and so that's a big part of our lives. So, what advice or encouragement might you give for those who are like trying to navigate all these choices and changes?
Yeah, I would definitely say that something I wished someone had told me when I was looking at these options is that where the Lord has you is right where you're supposed to be, and that you can never be behind or lagging in life if you're in His will and following Him. And so just, take comfort in the fact that, like, if you're obeying him and following him and going where he's leading, like, that's all you need to do, and that's right where you need to be. And I just think it's so, like I said earlier, so easy to get caught up in the, like, agenda or the way we think our life's supposed to go based on how other people's lives are looking. And it's just where he has you is right where you need to be. And I don't know.
I kind of hear you saying avoid comparisons too.
Yeah,
right?
That's so true.
That can be a big one.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and just, really, like, honestly, another thing that I would say is this doesn't really have to do with, like, making a decision on, like, college or whatever it is, but just, like, looking at the truths that you know about the Lord and about yourself, and just, like, digging deep and asking yourself, do I really believe this about the Lord, or do I really believe this about myself? Honestly, that is going to help you so much in whatever decision or transition you make, because once you're, like, believing and living out of those truths, you find so much security, and that's just going to help a lot.
Yeah. That's great advice. So tell us, as we wrap up here, what's next?
So in end of August, I will go alumni team lead for the World Race. So that basically means that I will be leading a group of girls for 3 months at the beginning of their gap year with World Race. So exactly what I did last year, they're doing this year. And so I just get to lead them because I've already done the thing. And I get to just show them the ropes, walk alongside them, encourage them, challenge them in their first few months. So, I'm really excited.
Great.
Yeah.
Great. Well, we're excited for you and to track with you on this journey. So thanks again for joining me for this episode of Navigate.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. I hope listening in on this conversation with Emma Austin has been encouraging for you. You won't want to miss the next episode where we continue the conversation about TCKs with my guest and longtime friend, Shad Phillips. Thanks for joining me today for this episode of Navigate Podcast. I've been your host, Tim Austin, and you can also find me hanging out at EncompassLifeCoaching.com as a coach and a blogger. If you want to leverage the growth and discovery opportunities in a transition season, reach out to me at EncompassLifeCoaching.com and learn how some one-on-one coaching can create space for intentional conversations, which then become catalysts for growth in any season you find yourself in. I hope this has been helpful to you, and if it has, would you mind rating the podcast, writing a review, and sharing on social media? And of course, you can always subscribe so that you're sure to get in on the next episode, and I'll catch you next time.